What follows is an interview with the wonderful actor and drama teacher Jono Freeman. We explore the character of Iago from the play Othello. Please enjoy. Have you played Iago before in a play?
Yes. So Iago was like he was the second role I played in terms of like performing Shakespeare. He was the second time I played a character in a Shakespeare production. But I sort of had this fascination with Iago from way back. I think, like it took me a while to get into Shakespeare. It was a bit of a kind of a long, slow journey of getting connected with Shakespeare. I remember in high school, I loved Henry V. It was the first time I really enjoyed Shakespeare. Was Henry V. I was like, wow, I was engaged, and then nothing for a while. But then, yeah, it was like 95, I think 1995, when Oliver Parker had released the film version of Othello with Lawrence Fishburne and Kenny Branagh as Iago, and I saw that, and I fell in love with the story, but also the character. And I think it was because I was around 18, 19 at that time, and I was in love for the first time, but also I was really I was a really jealous, finding out, discovering how jealous a person I was. Like and I still think back, and I still am, I suppose. It's hard. It's not one of those. It's not easy to shake jealousy. It's one of those things that, it's one of those parts of our makeup, I suppose, that we can be aware of and try to, I don't know, manage, but you can't rid yourself of it. I feel it's like it's sort of genetically programmed or something, maybe. Anyway, so I was in love and I was very jealous, and I saw that movie, and I just really connected, I guess, on that emotional level of the jealous. I mean, I also thought Othello was an amazing character, but Iago as well, particularly this villainous manipulator, really caught my attention. And of course, Branagh being, the sort of, the great Shakespearean actor of our time, doing such an amazing job on film as well. And I think Shakespeare can make an incredible impact on film too, because the characters become more human in that medium, I think, because of course the characters of Shakespeare's plays, they're not human beings. They're fictional constructs, and you can't, that sort of, you can't take them out of the world that they're created in. But on film, I feel they can make such an impact, as well as, within all of the techniques that the filmic genre can use to pull us into the story, can be quite devastating. So yeah. So anyway, then years and years later, I was able to play that part. I was in Japan, and this company that put on their big yearly Shakespeare. This guy who was the kind of director of that company, he'd seen a version in Sydney actually when he travelled there, and he was like, I think it was the first time he'd seen the play. And he was like me. He was totally like just spellbound by the play, and he was like, "We have to put it on." And he asked me to do it, and I was like ecstatic. I was so thrilled to be able to play that part. And the part I'd played before that, the year before, was Lysander in Midsummer Night's Dream, which I'd enjoyed, and I was like, great, I got to do my first Shakespeare. But playing Iago was really the first time where I was properly possessed the by playing Shakespeare, and I think it was, I don't know, Stephen Burkoff, who said that Shakespeare infects you. And I felt that. I felt infected by Shakespeare, his language and this character. And I had so many lines to learn, you know, which initially when I was looking at it, I was like, my God, how am I going to learn all these lines? But, you know, it just came so easily, actually, because it really just consumes you. And it's such a pleasure to be working with the language, and especially with Iago. He's got some incredible language, which is quite, you know, sorts of magic spells and dark stuff, which is great. But also Iago as well, I feel, is like, he's a player, he's an actor, he's a speaker, and he's in total cahoots with he's connected to the audience too. He's like a narrator, a mediator, he's an MC, he's managing the whole show. He's driving the action, controlling the action. He's cultivating all of these different relationships with different characters. He's having the time of his life, and he's so charming. And so I had the time of my life, and parts of him were seeping into me as well. I was, you know, it was great. It was great.
You were becoming the character on some
Well,
level.
yeah, I mean, it's sort of like I was, I've definitely felt like I just became, bits of him rubbed off on me. Not the bad bits, of course, but the good bits.
Okay.
Were rubbing off on me. And again, the language as well. Like, I found myself, and that's the beauty of Shakespeare, I think you find yourself appropriating his language, using his language, and it sort of ferments in your brain. It just sort of like, and comes out as well in your everyday life.
Did you find acting with other actors helped you memorize your lines, say your lines, easier than it would be if you were doing it by yourself?
I think what you have to do, I mean, look, you have to do a lot of work with Shakespeare to learn your lines. I downloaded like maybe 5 different audio books of the play, and I used to listen to that in the bath every night and when I went to bed. Any spare moment I had, I was reading the script. It doesn't come easily, actually, learning Shakespeare's lines, because it's not the normal natural way we speak these days. It's not conversational. It often goes the very long way around to say something, but that's the beauty of it. That's so amazing to listen to and watch. But in terms of getting it in there, it can be quite difficult. You have to work. You have to do a lot of work. But when you do that work, once you do that work, it's, like I said before, it's such a pleasure, and then it comes so easily. But after you've done that work, so yeah, you have to, and it's a little bit like when you go to see a Shakespeare as well. Especially if you don't know a lot of Shakespeare, you do have to do a little bit of work. You have to invest a little. You have to maybe have a look at the plot, work out the characters, so that you're going in a little bit armed for what you're about to see. Because, they're not normal stories. These are some epic, very complicated stories, and it's not our usual tongue. It's it's poetry, and it's using language that is quite old.
Yeah.
So you do have to do a bit of work, but it really pays off.
Yeah. And like you mentioned before, and maybe before we got on air, is you have to spend time. You have to spend time with the Shakespeare language. There's no way around that.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean,
But
you
it's
have to,
totally worth it.
but it is totally worth it. And the new insights just keep avalanching, right? The more you read
Yeah.
it, it's just,
Oh,
yeah.
for sure. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like, you know, I feel like you have to see a number of productions to really start appreciating all of it. Like, I don't know, when I was at this course, you know, this lecturer, this Shakespeare teacher was telling us that, you know, he gave us some percentage of how much the audience is actually going to get when they're listening to you, and it was, you know, surprisingly low. But he's like, you know, if you can get them understanding this much, you're doing a good job. So I feel like the more we revisit a play, each time a new thing is going to become clear for us, or a new way of seeing a scene or a character or a line, a new thing. But I feel also that's something that you know, comes with the plays themselves. There's an infinite amount of ways that these plays can be told, you know,
Mm-hmm.
which is
And
all about,
interpreted.
yes, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's all about the ambiguity within the text. And Othello is maybe, for me, the most ambiguous of all of Shakespeare's plays. Um, there are so many layers of ambiguity, I think, and it's also because it's dealing with you know, truth and deception, but it's also dealing with jealousy as well, this passion of jealousy, which I feel like Bacon knew about more than anyone, because he was, you know, the victim of envy, jealousy his whole life, particularly his if we're looking at when it was written, I think the first mention of Othello is around 1604, but it's not called Othello then, it's just called the Moor of Venice, I think. But around that time, there's a sort of a switch in terms of there's a switch in terms of the content of the Shakespeare plays. They become a little bit. They start exploring the darker aspects of humanity, I feel, and I feel that's because a number of tragic things happened in his life. Around 1600 after that, and also he's, you know, he's the victim of Robert Cecil's machinations, who was his whole life envious of Bacon, and who was a master manipulator, as Iago was. So Cecil for me is another kind of incarnation of, Iago is an incarnation of Cecil, as are a lot of his characters, I think,
Richard the
um,
Third.
in some way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially these kind of manipulators.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, Iago is also, I mean, yeah, he's like we said, he's whatever you make him to be. It's that whole Shakespeare is a mirror, and the characters are what we make them. And so Iago is the same. He's a mirror, for the villain that we wish to make him. But he's, I think, also he's a psychopath, I feel, in that he's devoid of empathy, devoid of humanity, as I think Cecil was. So,
Mhm. To satisfy his own ends constantly or always.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's weird. With Cecil, I think it's obvious that his motivation, Cecil, it was a public motivation. Power was his motivation. And I think it's kind of the same with Iago. Like, the source for Othello was a short Italian novel, which was never translated into English. But the source was, that the source had Iago, the ensign, who was in love with Desdemona. That was his motivation. He was in love with Desdemona. But in Othello, Iago is not so much in love with Desdemona, but he's rather in love with this power that he appropriates. He's kind of, for the duration of the play at least, he is the center of everyone's world. Everyone is coming to him. He's like a puppeteer. He's controlling everything, and that's what is driving him. But the motivation, like why, we don't really know, which is why I feel he's such a fascinating character for us, because we never quite know what ultimately what I mean, yes, he's in love with this power, but what's motivating him? I mean, people will say, oh, he's jealous. He's jealous of Othello. But I don't think so. And he does talk. I mean, there's a couple of moments where he talks about, he says, yeah, I think Othello, he says, I think Othello's slept with his wife. But he also says that, I think Cassio slept with my wife too. So it's kind of like, these are kind of like little throwaway comments, which aren't really, if you think about it, they don't legitimize the amount of destruction he causes. They're completely, it's completely disproportional. So I feel like, I don't know that he is actually jealous. And for me, as I said, I feel he's psychopathic. He doesn't feel anything, I don't think. So we never really find out what he's about. We don't know. At the end, he says, what you know, without telling us anything about what's driving him. What does he want? What does he actually want at the end of the day? We never know, which is why he's the source of so much speculation over the years that this has been sort of performed. He's fascinating to us because he's a mystery, which again, for me, fits in beautifully with the whole Shakespeare enterprise in terms of, the mirror, the ambiguity, the mystery, and it's up to us to work it out, which is why there's always going to be very different types of Iago. You will see like really horrible, nasty Iagos. You'll see some Iagos that come across as quite a nice guy. He's quite a nice guy, but he's just consumed by jealousy, or is he a psychopath? Is he? I mean, there's so many different ways you can play him, I feel, but I think, for me, Othello, I mean, it's a tragedy, but in a way it's kind of, for me, it's a comedy also. It's part of this new genre that Shakespeare was, this tragic comedy blend, this blend of both of those things. I feel like the play has roots in commedia dell'arte in terms of the comedy and the archetypes, but also I was researching that it goes even maybe further back to Plautus, I think it was, this Roman playwright who was looking at comic servant figures, subverting the master-servant relationships. There's all this, this stuff about the handkerchief, everything hanging on the handkerchief. It's kind of, there's a lot of comedy in this play. And for me, I milked every moment I could of that comedy, because I think that makes the end even more devastating. And, I've seen so many productions of this, of Othello, that are all so heavy and, everything's so, there's no life, no fun, no energy, no sort of that fun energy. And I think it needs that. Apparently the very first Iago was an actor called Robert Armin, I think his name is. And he was an actor who used to play the intelligent clown characters. And I think that's a clue as well. Like, Iago is he's a bit of a clown. He's a comic character. And the audience love that too, because jealousy is kind of something that can be really ironic. It's that sort of, I've got a quote actually. Do you want to hear my quote?
I do.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, part of Iago's psychological makeup is playfulness, right? He likes to play.
Yeah. And he enjoys that. And the audience, I feel, can enjoy that too. It says, where is it? Jealousy, a unique passion, bears within itself the possibility of the tragic. The essence of jealousy lies in the dialectic, which admittedly also allows it to turn into the comical, because jealousy is love that destroys by wanting to preserve. So it's like we watch Othello kind of do all of this to himself. You know, Iago is, and there's like moments where he's kind of honest about it. He's honest about, he's honest with us about playing the villain. He's like, look, I'm going to play the villain. Here we go. Watch me do it. And he kind of like just suggests, just drops things into Othello. And he says, beware of jealousy. Look out for jealousy, bud. It's this monster that feeds on itself.
Yeah.
So for me, Iago is this kind of beautifully represents these empty spaces, this kind of void, which kind of works nicely with the psychopath idea that he's empty. And then just the audience and the other characters just kind of pour themselves into this space. So yeah, Iago just has a few little things he has to do, and Othello is just eaten up. And it's kind of funny. I know that sounds horrible, and it's not so funny at the end, of course, when he kills his wife. But through the play, I've seen a number of productions where the audience are having a great time watching Othello just make a complete fool of himself. Someone who takes himself too seriously, unlike Iago, a fun trickster who is kind of like of a lower class as well. So he's more relatable for us, I feel. But yeah, again, this play, does it have a protagonist? Who's the protagonist, Othello or Iago? We don't really, by the end, we don't like either one. There's no kind of hero that we side with. We don't like either of them. But through most of the play, I would say we are on Iago's side because he's fun, intelligent, charming. He's tearing up the world, and we enjoy watching that. And Othello just walks right into all of the little traps he leaves for him. And there's this one scene where everything kind of switches, where Iago just has to, he's just like, oh, did Cassio know Desdemona before you two? Oh, right. Oh, yeah. You know, he just sort of suggests that Cassio's not honest. And from that moment, he just puts the thought in Othello's head. And then it's all that, those tragic gears start grinding. It all just starts, you know, grinding towards this final tragic endpoint. But Iago doesn't have to do much, you know.
Once he gets the ball rolling, it kind of rolls itself.
Yeah. And you know, everyone around him seems just like stupid. I mean, you've also got Roderigo, who again is a comic figure for me, you know. And he just, if you look at the stuff Iago says to Roderigo, it's ridiculous, the stuff he says. It's like, but Roderigo believes it. But interestingly, if we're talking about irony, Roderigo is actually on to Iago. I think, you know, he knows that Iago's up to no good, but, you know, Iago kills him before he can say anything. And also Iago's wife is on to him as well. But Iago manages to, he's great at compartmentalizing everything. He keeps everything very separate. But yeah, but that's the other thing, you know, the dramatic irony of Iago is that, you know, the audience, the audience knows what he's up to, and so they are complicit with him, which I find is this beautiful way of involving us and then pulling the rug on us right at the end, so that we feel like we were part of it. You know, we watched him do all this and we didn't do anything about it, so we feel kind of dirty and horrible at the end, which is great. You know, it's so brilliant the way that, you know, kind of Shakespeare has made Iago the lovable connection with this story. It's so clever.
Yeah, yeah. When you were studying Iago, were there some anchor points or some qualities that you tried to hone in on?
Yeah, well, I was sort of like, yeah, I mean, do you know what I did? I watched, and this is a great thing about Shakespeare because, it's been around for hundreds of years, and there's so many actors who have come before you, who have played these roles, and you can learn from those. You can watch them. And I watched heaps of different productions. Obviously, I watched Branagh's again. McKellen did a version. Bob Hoskins played Iago in a version. I watched this version at the Globe on a recorded version at the Globe that was amazing. So I kind of watched all of these and I took little bits that I liked. But it's interesting, because I trained at a very method school that was all about, which is very big into profiling your character, working out all the specifics of your character, really giving them a backstory, giving them a reason for everything they do, and really going into depth in terms of all of their motivations and stuff. But for this particular role, I did none of that. I just, which is kind of interesting because I just focused more on, yeah, what I was doing rather than being this character. It was like I just focused on what I was doing, and I just tried to, yeah, like create intimacy with all of these different characters that I was involved in. And so in terms of preparation, yeah, I didn't, wasn't sort of poring over things. I was just kind of like focusing on having a great time, being a showman, and yeah, cultivating these relationships with all of these different characters. And yeah, at the time, I don't think I gave Iago this psychopath diagnosis. I think that was later because I wrote a paper about Iago when I did my master's a year later. I was still kind of I was still thinking about Iago, and I had to write the paper, and I was like, I'm going to write it about him and why we're so fascinated by this particular character. And so once I did I did more research about him. I sort of gave him this psychopath diagnosis, and I found that there's kind of this at the moment as well. There's this real interest in psychopaths in terms of our stories, our entertainment, popular culture, Dexter, Hannibal, these psychodramas or whatever if you want to call them, which are all about creating pro attitude feelings towards these serial killers, these psychopaths. We love them. We're so entertained by them. And there was this whole thing about this. If you can get an audience fascinated by a character, you can get them feeling sympathy, um, kind of, yeah, you can get them sort of feeling, getting them on your, you can have
Rooting,
people
rooting for you.
on their side,
Yeah, yeah.
and I thought that was really interesting because Shakespeare was diagnosing such characters hundreds of years. I mean, I think the diagnosis for psychopaths is kind of, maybe 19th century that happened. But here's Shakespeare already aware of this type, this type of human, this discontented human that doesn't feel.
And the royal court, right? Elizabeth's court must have been filled with those types of people.
Yeah,
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 totally.
yeah.
And like I said before, Bacon had a real. I think he identified envy as like, yeah, something that he had a lot of personal experience with in terms of people envying him, his gifts, his talents, especially with Edward Coke, and Robert Cecil, his two chief kind of life antagonists, who
And
were
Coke was a fellow judge or fellow barrister, right? And Cecil was he the spy master after his
Cecil,
father?
Robert Cecil.
Yeah, was he kind of the spy? Was he always trying to root out conspiracies or things against the queen?
He was just trying to take, like his father before him, he was just trying to take power for himself and his family.
Yeah.
And I think I think he had a lot of physical afflictions, but also he was not. I don't think he was particularly gifted, and he certainly wasn't virtuous. And so I think he spent all of his life trying to suppress Francis from advancement. And then when James came to the throne, Cecil engineered a marriage between Bacon and a commoner so that Bacon couldn't have children that would be a threat to the line. But yeah, there's rumors that Cecil even was involved in kind of finally getting rid of Elizabeth, and then she would never have named James as her successor. She was silent on the issue of succession, but right at the last minute she dies, and Cecil claims that, oh yeah, James was who she wanted. So I think he engineered the whole thing as a way of taking power. He could obviously he couldn't rule himself, but again, like with Burleigh and Elizabeth, it was kind of ruling through James. But and this researcher Richard Wagner actually wrote a really interesting paper about Othello and Bacon, showing that initially the play wasn't called Othello, nor was the character was just called the Moor, which was in the original source material. The characters were just called Moor, ensign, general, whatever. They weren't given character names. But after 1621, the name Othello appears, and it's obvious that there's a cipher count that shows that Othello and Bacon have the same cipher count, because and Othello is the most heavily revised of all of the Shakespeare plays, actually. So I feel like Othello, the play, had a massive journey from when it was first kind of birthed until it was put into the folio, because Bacon himself had experience with the role of the cuckold, because this commoner that he was kind of married to ended up having an affair, and he was kind of processing those emotions, obviously not in the same way as the character of Othello. Interestingly, Wagner also believes that the character of Othello is based on Walter Raleigh, this hot-headed general. But after 1621, after this affair happens, he's able to understand how that feels, because it happens to him. And so he comes up with the name Othello, which has this same cipher count as Bacon does. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I do believe, I believe Raleigh had a heavy hand in Othello as well. So that's just based upon some of my research. But so definitely Bacon and Raleigh there. Do you think? So he says, Iago, he says, "I am not what I am."
Yeah. So again, he's transparent to some degree with the audience and with Roderigo.
What is he saying with that famous phrase?
It's right at the start, because Roderigo is like, because right at the start that's how the play opens, the scene between Iago and Roderigo. And Roderigo's angry because they're meant to be kind of allies against the Moor, and Iago's saying, yeah, look, he's promoted Cassio, not me. I'm just as I think Roderigo's upset because he loves Desdemona. He wants Desdemona. But I think there's a feeling that Iago is jealous because Cassio has been promoted instead of him. And so Iago is reassuring Roderigo and saying, hey, listen, I'm 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 only sort of following him to serve my turn upon him. So I'm following him and he says, for my peculiar end. He says, I'm there to work a trick on him, I guess, basically. I'm not, it will seem like I love him, but I don't. I actually hate him. That's what he says at the start. But, it's interesting because I guess can we ever really trust anything Iago says? Because he says such different things to all of these different people. Some things are constant, some things there's grains of truth, I suppose, in different things that he says, but some of the other stuff he says is so far out. And then he talks to us as well, and it feels like some of the things he says to us aren't genuine either. So he kind of has this inner world and this outer world as well, the outer world, which he sort of shares with us. But at the same time, can we believe anything he says? Especially if he tells us I'm not what I am. It's like, well, what are you really? Again, it's this mystery. We don't know. We can never work out what is actually going on in his head. We don't know.
Yeah. In rereading it recently, who else says a similar line to that is Desdemona. She says she's waiting for Othello to come to shore, and she says, "I am not what I am." Something very. So it's a similar line to Iago. So I thought that was an interesting connection that the Shakespeare writer did there. So what do you feel his relationship is with Othello? What do you think there is any love there, and maybe not homoerotic love, but do you think there is some type of love or some type of connection with Othello?
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, and interesting you talk about that, because I've seen, you hear some critics or some productions will also, will suggest that Iago is in love with Othello. Some people will suggest that Iago is jealous of Othello and his position as the general and the love he has from the Venetians. What is his relationship with Othello? I mean, again, that's up to you. It's up to you to decide that, and it's up to any production that stages that. It's up to them. But also remember, they're soldiers as well. It's such an intimate play, Othello, but it's set against this massive epic backdrop of the Venetians and the Turks in this kind of age of pirates, but they're soldiers as well. So, and a lot of productions focus on the bond between soldiers too. So I think they're all things that you can play with and suggest and experiment with. But Iago in the play says a number of times, I hate them all. He says it, I hate them all. So what's their relationship? I mean, again, you can say that he's saying one thing and meaning another. But again, there was this other,
To borrow from Hamlet, is he protesting too much by repeatedly saying that?
Could be.
Yeah.
But again, in the play, Iago is constantly called honest. Honest Iago. Oh, what an honest chap. Honest. He's called honest so many times. So again, it's the number of times that something gets said doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And it's sort of, is it the opposite? Is it saying something that's...
And I think that honesty point, to your earlier point, when you were trying to be present and connect with everyone, right? I think a good Iago tries to connect with everyone, right? In a present, honest way, in a way, like I am present, right?
Yeah, everyone thinks he's amazing, and
Yeah.
that scene where they first arrive at Cyprus, there's this back and forth he has with Desdemona, and he's witty and funny, and he's joking, and everyone loves him because he's got. And later on, when they're all getting drunk, he's got songs he's singing. He's always got a joke. He's always got a song. He's a shoulder you can cry on. He's just, outwardly he's a fabulous guy. He's
Mhm.
honest and fabulous outwardly,
Yeah. Yeah.
um and I think he for this window of the play anyway, because remember, we only see him within this short window of the action of the play. So it's interesting to think about beforehand, what's his life been like. We again, it's a massive mystery. And his relationship with his wife as well. Different productions show a very different relationship with his wife. Sometimes he's abusive, sometimes he's loveless, sometimes there is some love there. Ultimately, she is also complicit in what happens, because she gives him the handkerchief, and she also is kind of foolish in doing that. Um, Everyone is so foolish in this play except for Iago. Um, but yeah, there's this other quote I found I wanted to share with you by this guy called Dashlager. And he says attempts to rationalize and justify Iago's behavior on non-dramatic grounds serve to destroy the very efficacy and supremacy of Iago's role as a dramatic villain. So I think Shakespeare has deliberately done this. He's deliberately made Iago a void, as a way of creating something very unique and very, in a weird way, very human and complicated and complex. And that's what makes him brilliant. That you can try and rationalize his behavior. You can try to label who he is and what he is, but ultimately, there's no point, because that's what makes him brilliant.
That's kind of like what Melville did with the white whale, I think. Kind of similar
Okay.
things. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. A
Yeah.
projection of ultimate evil. And yeah. Really,
Yeah.
what is it? What is its source? Why does it do what it does?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and this is it, I think we try to understand him as a human, but again, he's not a human. It's better to think of Iago as a figure. He's not, he's a character in a play, and you can't take him out of the context of the play, because he's not created in a vacuum. He's created amongst a whole system, a whole interconnected ensemble of other characters and other players. But I think, yeah, for me, when I was writing the paper, I talked about Iago as being a riddle, a puzzle. And what we can do is we can try to make the riddle sing. I said we can try to make the riddle sing. And what we can try and do, I guess, is there's this kind of three ways of looking at the character as a kind of embodiment or of some sort of abstraction. And he often gets kind of called the embodiment of evil. Yeah, he's evil. So he's representing some kind of abstraction, but he's also a theatrical convention. But also, I guess, we also kind of have to make him a human being as well, a believable human being, if we're going to invest in the play. So it's about trying to make these three things kind of work in harmony together as a way of making this riddle sing for an audience, I think. And that's changed over time as well. It's been interesting it's interesting watching Iago through time, how the different treatments he's received through time. Yeah.
What do you think his motivation is with Roderigo? Is it just to purely play with someone? Is it just to what is
Well,
it?
he says thus do I ever make my fool my purse. So I think he takes cash from Rodrigo. There's this great monologue that's this put money in the. He says, "Money, put money in thy purse." He says it maybe 4 or 5 times in this monologue. He's kind of like brainwashing Rodrigo, and that's what he does through the whole play. He just brainwashes this poor guy because he knows he's a bit of a fool. So I think Rodrigo, yeah, he's this really clever kind of side plot. But in terms of why Iago keeps him around, I think he keeps him around for the cash, but also, yeah, for the sport, for the cash.
Okay.
And he uses him as he uses him in the drunk scene with Cassio. He gets Cassio drunk, and then he gets Rodrigo to start a fight with him because he knows how to push people's buttons. And he hatches all of these plans right in front of us. He has these monologues where he's like, let's see what to do next, and he'll share that with us, and then it'll all play out. So we're sort of like, yeah, we're really connected with what happens. But I think, Rodrigo, again, there's such great comedy there, which needs to be used. He's a fabulous comic character, but again, really tragic right at the end. It's horrible. He kills Rodrigo, and Rodrigo, right on the cusp of kind of Rodrigo working it all out, he starts to suspect that, yeah, Iago, and he calls him an inhuman dog right before he dies,
Mm-hmm.
So it is tragic at the end, but through the rest of the play, it's funny. It's another one of these funny things.
Yeah.
Because Iago has monologues to him saying that, oh yeah, Desdemona isn't in love with the Moor anymore. She's now in love with Cassio. Yeah, but it's not going to last long. Don't worry. I will have you and her together. No problems. Yeah. But we've got to do this first. We've got to kill Cassio first. You're going to have to do that. Okay. Yeah. Poor guy.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned it. He's wonderful at being on your side, right? Like, I am your guy. I'm your right-hand man. He does that to every single person.
Everyone. Even Desdemona right at the end, he creates all of this drama, and then her at the end, she's like, I don't know what I've done. I'm beside myself, and he comforts her. I remember, I made that a really nice, tender, intimate moment with her when he says to her, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. It's just the business of the state. Don't worry, it's all going to be fine. Pick yourself up. Yeah.
So I got 2 questions for you on that scene. So one, while you were acting that scene, did you feel humanity in that scene as Iago?
Do you know what? I don't know. It didn't really, for me, it didn't really matter what I was feeling. It was just what I was showing, what I was trying to show. Like earlier, there's a scene where Othello comes in raging. He's like, you've put me on the rack. I was fine when I didn't know about this, but now it's in my brain. I'm going crazy. And he kind of attacks Othello. And in the scene we had, Othello actually sort of grabbed my hand and stabbed my hand with this knife. And my sort of process as an actor behind it was just thinking that I wasn't actually in that much pain, but I really played it over the top. I was wounded physically, he stabbed my hand. I was wounded, but also wounded because, I tried to tell him something as a friend, and this is how he was treating me. I was looking out for him and trying to care for him as a friend, and this is what I get back. So it's just about showing these emotions, but I was never feeling them. It was more, I guess, as an actor, I was just always concerned with showing the feelings, trying to be as convincing as possible. And
I lost you there for a second. Okay, you're back.
So that's what I focused on.
Okay. Do you think Shakespeare on some level tried to let's say his humanity, because a Shakespearean scholar, so let me take a second, a Shakespearean scholar said that after that incident with Desdemona, he's kind of short-circuited in some respect. He's not as verbose, or he's not as eloquent subsequent to that scene, that somehow her suffering impacted him unconsciously. Is that a possibility?
I'm
Did it
not sure,
trigger?
man.
Hmm.
I think that's a structurally within the play. That is the moment where everything comes to a head. So he's been laying all these traps. He's hatched this whole plot, and structurally, right at the end, this is almost where we're hitting the peak. And he says something, a line. He says a line about this is the night that will either make me or undo me. Quite, I think he's like, this is it. This is the moment that everything comes to a head, and I think that's just what's happening. It's all kind of everything's. This is the big moment, and unfortunately, it doesn't go well for him. It all kind of backfires. It all comes apart. So of course we're going to notice some differences, I think, in terms of him and the action at that point. And you're right. By the end, he completely shuts up shop. He says, from this point forward, I'm not going to say another word. He says that right at the end. And they're like, oh yeah, we'll torture you. We'll get it out of you. But he goes, so I guess you're right. He kind of does stop talking. He becomes less of a speaker as all of this goes down, because I feel the focus starts to move away from him, and then it starts to move to Othello, Desdemona, as it should, as when he kills her. So yeah, I think that's natural. I don't know about short-circuited. I
Okay.
think he's still he's still working. He's still in his prime, but the events don't go his way. And that's dictated by the story.
Yeah, that's part of the structure of the play, as you said.
Mm.
Yeah. He must also be, he's very perceptive, obviously. I mean, he has that wonderful, Desdemona says, how would you describe a deserving woman, I think is how she describes it. And then he has a beautiful, he knows, he describes a beautiful woman internally, what a beautiful woman is internally. So he's also very
This is when they
perceptive.
arrive in Cyprus, right? Or
Correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 That's the thing. And this is this appeal in psychopaths as well. They are intelligent, really clever. Some of history's worst serial killer psychopaths have been brilliant. And this is something, again, that we find very attracted to. We're very attracted to these villains in terms of, and remember, this is a show, it's entertainment. In real life, this might be different. In real life, I'm sure we are less attracted to psychopaths and serial killers, but in terms of entertainment, a show, this is something we find very fascinating and attractive, how clever he is. And he's got some, there's a beautiful speech about when he has to Rodrigo, where he's talking about where it's up to, and I feel like this embodies the kind of spiritual message of Shakespeare, in that tragedy especially used to be about, in Greek times, and remember, Shakespeare is a renaissance of the ancient Greek form of theatre. And so in the ancient Greek form of theatre, it was the gods, the universe, that kind of controlled our fate. But in Shakespeare, in this new meta form of theatre, it's human beings. We have agency for ourselves. It's us that create our destinies. We do this. And he has a speech where he says something like, it's within us. We're the ones that control how we are, how we feel, what we do. So he's the mouthpiece there for a lot of truisms, a lot of really deep philosophical stuff. He's the mouthpiece for that. So yeah, again, it's one of those things that can help us side with him, and then help to make us feel horrible at the end when all of this happens.
Yeah, he uses the garden as the metaphor, right? We can harvest what certain qualities, we
Yeah,
can
exactly.
plant certain qualities. Yeah,
Exactly. And he's using that for evil ends, or he's
yeah.
not using that knowledge for good, but it's still knowledge and it's coming out of him. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, just a very perceptive, very intelligent character, obviously.
Yeah. And that's the great thing about psychopaths too, is that they're able to watch and replicate. You know, they can pretend to be feeling normal human beings, but they're not. It's all a show. And so for an actor, that's great. That's a really fun thing to play with, you know, that somebody who doesn't feel anything at the core, but watches what other people do and then just replicates that. And that's so frightening that people like that are amongst us everywhere. They're amongst us, and we won't know until the very last minute that,
Yeah,
you know, that's the really scary thing about psychodramas, psychopaths as well, that they're amongst us. Yeah.
and they almost have an intuitive sense, maybe, of our motivations, what motivates us, what triggers us, what can really
Yeah.
get
And
us.
they're
Yeah.
disconnected from that. They're not affected like we are, you know, they're kind of like, yeah,
Every,
disconnected, so they can enjoy watching it go horribly for other people,
to be
but
kind of
without
meta,
feeling anything themselves.
yeah, to be kind of meta, it's everything is a play, everything is a stage play.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
again is great, you know, because Shakespeare is so meta.
hmm
Um, yeah, and this is why actors love playing Iago, I think, because he's a villain and actors love playing villains, but you know, but two, because he is such a player and you've got such a free reign of what you want to do, and the manipulation as well is so much fun to play. It's so fun just having everyone eat out of your hand. And oftentimes, you know, he's got so many great little throwaway lines like this. There's a line where when they're in Cyprus and he's like, oh, that's not so good. And then Othello's like, what? And he's like, oh, nothing. And he's like, oh, Othello's like, oh, was that Cassio? And he was like, and Iago says, nah, that can't be him. He's sort of skulking off like that, you know, looking the way he's done it. So he just drops these little things in. And it's that scene as well, as that scene where he's with Othello and Othello's saying, do you think he's honest? And Iago just repeats everything Othello says. He's like, honest. And Othello says, why do you keep repeating me? It's like there's something in your mind that you're not sharing. So he's brilliant at just these human interactions, and pulling stuff out of people.
Yeah, dropping a little
Without
seed.
having to. Yeah.
Yeah, and then watching it grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So having the time of his life, I think, within that play. And I made sure, and I think that's so important. You know, a lot of actors playing him as the villain, you know, and having him so emotional and affected, I think is not the right choice for me anyway. I think he should be emotionally detached and just having a wonderful time. For me, that's more interesting to watch, and it's more powerful in serving the text.
I think a powerful portrayal. I have seen maybe one Iago, but this is just is if he does play kind of a beautiful man. You know, he is that beautiful man to everyone, but he's not. You know, but to really make that the actor to really feel that beauty, that beautiful man quality. You know, that I am on your side, I am here for you, and all that sort of thing. But then, of course, that he's the exact
Yes,
opposite.
because why else would they all? Yeah, why else would they all put their life in his hands? So
Right.
he's got to be honest, trustworthy, for these people to, yeah, even Cassio in the end. I think Cassio at the beginning, there's some tension between the characters. I mean, I think Iago hates Cassio because he thinks he's a wanker. And we see Cassio being a bit snobby about Iago. He says something about, oh, he's a soldier,
Not a
he's
scholar.
funny like a soldier. Yeah, exactly. He's funny like a soldier is. So he's a bit
Yeah.
of a snob, Cassio. But there's that, once he's drunk and he disgraces himself, Iago says to him, listen, don't worry. You just have to go to Desdemona and tell her to kind of speak good things about you to Othello, and you'll be fine. And so Cassio is trusting of Iago. Cassio starts loving Iago, and they become close as a result of that event. So all of these people, putting their life in his hands, and they would only do that if they felt that they could. And so, I agree. He has to be, it's nice if he's, like you said, beautiful. Because that is not what he is at all. And they're all just duped. And because we know they're being duped, we look at them and we kind of go, how could you be so stupid? And in that way, it's a great learning tool, this play. All of these plays are tools for learning about life and how to live better and how to make good choices. So this is a great learning tool in terms of, I feel like, look out for jealousy, because it is something, again, it's something, there's some beautiful lines in that, and even Amelia has some nice lines about jealousy, that it's something that it doesn't, she says something about that jealousy, it's not a rational thing. It's not something that's based on anything real or truthful. It's just this thing that comes of nothing and feeds on itself. So, so I feel like it's a great play about recognizing how dangerous and stupid jealousy is, and how we really have to be careful, because it can ruin your life. And like I said, when I was a 19-year-old watching it, I saw that, because I was so horrible to my girlfriend at that time, a number of times when she would just be talking to someone else. I remember how incensed I got and how horrible I was to her. I felt like I wasn't myself, but I was, eaten up by this thing, and it would take me over and make me behave in ways that I couldn't explain, and I couldn't recognize myself in those moments. And so I feel like that's why the play really spoke to me.
To your point there, well, and I think a lot of adolescent boys experience jealousy, definitely. Do you think, to get off Iago just a second, do you think a genius of Shakespeare using jealousy and really having Othello being unable to communicate to Desdemona, do you think representing jealousy as a means to, does jealousy render us incapable of communication, I guess? Do you think Shakespeare is saying that?
That's lovely. Yeah, totally. I feel like it can do. We'd rather, rather than Othello talk to Desdemona about this, he listens to this guy, his mate, his soldier buddy. He listens to him rather than confronting the situation. He sort of, confides in a mate and stews over it. And that's so true. And that's interesting about the play too, because Desdemona doesn't have time to be having these affairs with people, like even logistically within the time frame of the play, there's no, and she says that, when could I have done this? What are you talking about? So that's also part of the farcical nature of his thoughts. I feel that she didn't have the time or the opportunity to do that. But also that's a beautiful part of the tragic structure at the play too, because right at the end, we have, before he kills her, she tells him, I never gave Cassio the handkerchief, you're crazy, you're mad, but it's too late. So and every time I watch it, it's that beautiful thing where every time you watch it, you think maybe this time he'll listen and everything will be okay. And that's a beautiful kind of tragic part of great tragic writing, I think, is when you each time, even though you know the story, you watch it and you think maybe it'll be okay this time. So he gives us, there's that little window of communication there, but I think you're right, through the whole play, we don't see him confront her about this. Yeah, which I agree could be a nice comment on what jealousy does to us, and
Yeah.
how it affects our abilities to communicate with our loved ones.
Yeah. And maybe no matter what they say, we don't take it for truth because it's not our truth in our state of jealousy.
Because it's a passion, and the passion, the passion overrides the intellect. The passion overrides our ability to think and see rationally. Shakespeare talks a lot about that, I think, how passions just, come into conflict with our ability
Reason.
to think straight and make the
Yeah.
right decisions. Reason, great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and to kind of jump back to Cassio, he also has another famous line. He hath a daily beauty in his life that makes me ugly. Do you
Yeah, it's a
think
great line.
do you think he truly feels kind of that sense of inferiority with Cassio, or is he manipulating us, the audience, with that line?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's interesting. And I mentioned Iago's class earlier on, that he's kind of an everyday person. He's not a wealthy, authoritative kind of upper class character, whereas I think Cassio is. So I feel Iago can have fun kind of mocking that sort of upper class figure. And I think maybe that's also what he's using. He's talking a little bit about that there as well, I think. That Iago is nothing special. He's just an everyday type of chap. And compared to Cassio, he looks ugly. But yeah, that is interesting, because he's sort of he's legitimizing the need to kill both Roderigo and Cassio in that moment. At first, he's like, "Oh, yeah, which if this person dies, this will happen, but if this person dies, this will happen." And then in the end, he's sort of like, "Nah, they both kind of have to die." So, and it's that again, the gears. It's all kind of it's all getting crazy, as tragedies do. They end up with so many people dead at the end. It's a bloodbath at the end, and yeah, this is kind of the play ramping up to the next level, to that destruction. A little bit like, Romeo and Juliet is a bit like this too. It starts off fun, comic, beautiful, but then, just ends up, diving into oblivion. And this is it. I think this is the main distinguisher between the tragedies and the comedies. And Peter Dawkins talks about this, that the comedies are always moving towards love, and the tragedies are always moving away from love, and the tragedies are descending into what happens when we don't love. Yeah.
Yeah. And Iago is devoid of it. And so, okay. So being
Yeah.
devoid of love would in the Shakespeare world, and every world, would make you a villain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he seems full of love for most of the play.
Yeah.
He kind of acts in a loving way through most of the play, outwardly at least, anyway. Yeah.
So what do you think, does Desdemona have an effect on him? What is his relationship with Desdemona, do you think? Is she just a tool for his manipulation? Does she affect him in any way?
Yeah, that's interesting, because in one of his monologues, he says, I love her. He says, I love her. I love her too, though not out of absolute lust, he says. But again, it's that thing. Can you believe what he's saying in that moment? I feel like he talks a lot. And that's one of the things that I think we can't take for truth. I think it's one of those things that he's saying as part of his monologue as he's chatting to us, but I'm not sure we can trust that. Interesting again that we talk about the source for this play, and in the source, the ensign was in love with Desdemona. So yeah, I think that's a choice you can make. Yeah, some people might say Iago's in love with Othello. Some people might still play it like Iago wants Desdemona, but he can never have her. And so that's why he's acting the way he is. But yeah, for me, I was kind of like, I didn't sort of have any feelings on that. Again, she was just kind of another piece, another chess piece, if you like, to move around the table.
Do you think a possible motivation could be, and I think you addressed it in the beginning, power? So he does have people choosing his station in life, and he does find being a military man, I think, the most important. At least that's my reading. And he's not chosen for the lieutenancy, but he's actually lowered to an ensign, right? Which is one of the lower ranks. So other people control or are in power of his life to some degree, an important part of his life. And so that his motivation would be, okay, I'll show you what power is. I'm going to manipulate everybody. I'm going to manipulate everybody to death.
Totally. Some people will say the fact that he was passed over, because he's passed over for promotion and Cassio's chosen instead. And he's angry about that at the start, but he's angry when he's talking to Roderigo about that at the start. So is he actually angry about it? Don't know. But for sure, he's not a powerful person in terms of rank and station in life. But you're right. Through the events of the play, he has power. And you're right. Maybe that's what he's in love with. That's what he's taking. He's taking the power when it's not given to him. So he's showing us how he's going to take it, the real power.
Yeah. Because he has a high opinion of himself, and
ego is also something that goes with psychopaths too. I think they often have this, inflated sense of ego as well.
Yeah. Do you think and I've interviewed other people about Othello. Do you think the ego principle, because Iago is kind of a cognate of ego? Do you think?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if I don't know if that concept was around during the Elizabethan Jacobean times or not.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah. Do you believe Iago is suspicious by nature prior to his demotion or his lack of promotion? Do you believe he is paranoid, suspicious? That's just who he is.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up again. I didn't think about Iago outside of the bounds of that play. I just didn't try to process any reasons behind what he was doing in the play, which is unlike me as an actor, because I am an actor who likes to prepare for their parts and give reasons for why they do the things they do. But as I said before, I did none of that with Iago. Suspicious. What do you mean suspicious? Suspicious
of others' motivations towards him. So I think what Shakespeare does with a lot of the characters is every character is a mirror back to themselves. So he can't trust Cassio. Cassio is he slept with my wife. I can't trust Othello. He slept with my wife too.
But
So
these are all just that none of the for me, none of those things are legitimate. They're all just excuses. They're all just kind of, I don't know, things he throws out there, even maybe to throw us off a scent, even perhaps.
yeah, or kind of what we talked about, to manipulate the audience, to kind of get him on his side,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah, I think we're included in the manipulations as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay.
I get the feeling he doesn't. I got the feeling like he doesn't really like anyone. He doesn't like these people, which is why he's comfortable destroying all of them. Even his wife. Remember, he kills his wife in the end. He stabs her.
I was gonna.
So, he's empty. Like I said before, it's so great to think of him in terms of empty spaces. He's a void. He doesn't feel for anyone, and I don't think he likes any of these people. Which is why, he's so comfortable within the bounds of this play and just in taking them all down. It's almost like he's been living his whole life as kind of, if we do think about him before the play, maybe his whole life has just been a lie. He's just been, performing. He's just been, had these relationships where he's had to be nice and, and within the space of this play, he just decides, like, I'm going to drop all of that and just kill them all.
The thought just came to bring Bacon into it. Is there a connection with Iago? Feels he's so talented, so brilliant, but he doesn't have the position to match that, which Bacon did not, right? Bacon was passed over for everything until Cecil died, basically. 1613 was, I think, when Cecil dies is kind of when he truly advances. Do you think there's a connection there?
He does advance a little bit with Cecil, but only after he's made this arrangement to marry the commoner that I spoke about before.
No, when Cecil dies, when he dies in 16, right? When Cecil dies in 1613 is kind of when he starts to take off.
Really take off, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So Bacon wrote an essay on envy. I've got a quote from it here. A man that hath no virtue in himself ever envieth virtue in others, for men's minds will either feed upon their own good or upon others' evil. And who wanteth the one will prey upon the other, and whoso is out of hope to attain another's virtue will seek to come at even hand by depressing another's fortune. And I think that beautifully captures what was happening with Cecil and can also be applied to Iago as well.
I have a quote from Othello. Let's see. This is Iago describing Othello, and I lost it. Basically, he's describing Othello as such an honest, lovable, constant human being. So again, that kind of goes along with what Bacon's essay. He saw in Othello such a virtuous, loving, constant. He was always that way.
Yeah, and he is not that, and so he seeks to destroy that because he's not that. But he feeds off it initially, but ends up destroying it because that is not what he is. But yeah, Othello, such a fascinating character too, in that, he has all of these amazing traits. He's a brilliant general tactician, he's loved by the Venetians. He's respected. He's had this incredible life. He's fought all these battles and made his way out of slavery and all of these things. but he is like not able to handle love. Like he's not like romantic love. He's not. He's like a child in terms of his ability to in his experience with love, I suppose. And I guess that's what Iago sees. He knows that Othello is not experienced with love and the power of love. Yes, it's such a powerful thing, and it can be, but it can also, but he knows, I think he preys on Othello's inexperience with that form of love. So for all of Othello's amazing virtue and his traits, his great character traits, he knows how to bring him down because he's inexperienced with love.
Mm-hmm.
And he turns that love against him.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also that idea of the the enemy within. Like it's not kind of this Turkish threat that defeats Othello. Othello defeats himself. It's like Iago sort of sets something off, but ultimately it's Othello who brings about his own destruction. He's the one that kills his wife. So it's that whole idea of the enemy within.
Do you think he plays on an insecurity or a sense of inferiority already existing within Othello?
It's probably like an insecurity that comes with, I mean, it's like, again, thinking about myself as a 19-year-old, like I was not equipped I feel like I was not equipped to handle the intensity of the love that I was feeling for this girl. And that came out through the insecurities I had in terms of, and that came out through the jealousy. But I wasn't ready for it. And I think he sees that maybe Othello is the same. He's like, he's had this incredible life and whatever, but he's never been in love. And and if you're inexperienced with love, perhaps you can be very insecure about it.
Yeah, and I think Shakespeare points a couple of times in the play regarding Othello. Yeah, war is his what's at the end of the play? My occupation is gone, or something.
Yeah,
So yeah,
Othello's occupation's gone. Yeah.
so that war, and so he's not well versed in worldly matters. He's not well versed in relationships
Yes.
outside of war.
Yeah, exactly. And statecraft and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think Shakespeare's saying about love? So we've talked about it a little bit. What do you think Shakespeare's saying about love with Othello?
Well, love is for Bacon, love was truth, love, everything. Love was at the core of everything Bacon did. And as I said before, comedies are kind of always, going towards an affirming direction with love, and tragedies are against going the opposite way. So it's a cautionary tale. It's showing us what not to do, basically, but it's not saying don't love. It's just saying it's just, I feel like it's just making us aware of the fools we can be when we're under the influence of love. That love can go in dark directions, because Shakespeare is always about light and dark as well. And I think about Macbeth as well, and if we think about the love between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, there's love there, but the love goes in a crazy, weird direction. So I feel like it's a similar thing. It's not discouraging us from love, and it's not making any negative comments about love. It's just showing us that how things can go in really horrible directions when we're influenced by love, and that always there's a light and a dark side
to love.
Yeah, to humans as
to
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. And what do you think he, and you've touched upon it, what is he trying to make us beware of with Iago, as a human statement, I guess, as a more general statement?
Yeah. So I feel like Shakespeare is fascinated by human beings and the diversity within human beings, how there are such all of these different types of humans, and the plays are a great way for him to showcase those different types and to explore those different types. And within this play, I think he's using Iago to explore this particular type of person, which, as you said, in the court, I think he had a lot of exposure to. Someone who is, devoid of empathy and humanity, who, for unknown reasons, go about to destroy others, and that we should be wary of those people. A little bit like the psychopath thing, we should be aware that those people are around and can do serious damage. And he does that in a kind of, for me, does that in a very comic way for most of the time, because again, this is something I feel we're all going to be able to relate to, this jealousy thing, and how little things like a handkerchief can become such huge things, like life and death stakes in a handkerchief. So again, showing that ridiculousness of that, but the power as well, that it's funny, yes, but it's also very serious, which again is part of this beautiful combination of comedy and tragedy both together. So yeah, it's making us aware of those types of people, I think, but also it's making us aware of our own crazy behavior, because I feel like, as with all the plays, we can relate to all of those characters. All of those characters have something that we can relate to. And they're such open books for us. And again, with the mirror, we see what we want to see. We see what, our own lives, we see our own lives in those characters. They're so beautifully written that we can identify ourselves within one or many of those characters. And I feel like we can see ourselves in Othello and those characters, but we enjoy watching Iago lay this trap, because he's showing how stupid people are. Look at them. Look what they do. Look what we all do, and we enjoy that for most of the play. But then at the end, we kind of go, oh, yeah, ooh, which is brilliant. And we'll leave, so we will leave the theatre thinking about that for a long time afterwards, because we've had that rug pulled. It stays with us.
And the terrifying thought is that maybe each of us has a little bit of Iago in us.
Yeah, I feel like, we all manipulate situations. We all tell a little lie here and there, and maybe we all compartmentalize our lives a little bit as well. Sure, definitely. We're all, and I know that while I was playing Iago, I became very charming as a person. And I was much more aware of my powers to manipulate people and situations at that time. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So to the last question here, what did you learn, I guess, about what did you learn about Iago from an acting standpoint? And you've touched about it a lot, but I guess separate from reading Iago, was there something that when you were kind of imbibing him, you're like, oh, that's something new. That's something I didn't realize from just reading the play?
I don't know. Like I said, that was that playing that part was the first time I was really able to appreciate Shakespeare, and I'll never have such a fun time on stage as I did in that play. I think in terms of my career, that was the peak of fun times I had on stage because of the theatricality of his role. That he and I guess that's what I became very aware of the great actor that Iago really is. And I had the time of my life playing that part. And the fact that with Shakespeare, you can every word counts, you can really make every line count. Nothing is wasted. And so it was such a joy to work with a script like that, where every line was like genius. Every line was like gold. Every line felt beautiful in my mouth. Yeah. And I guess, it is that thing that the play is like this web, and he makes these ripples and the whole web moves. And I've never been in a play where I've played a character that has kind of had that power to affect every strand of the narrative. He's able to control and affect, and I've never, and probably will never have anything like that again. So I think that is a really unique part in that way. And also, like I said, actors love playing villains, but this is yes, he's a villain, but such a special variety of villain, such a unique creation. And I think I appreciated that much more, being able to play it.
I mean, he is considered the greatest villain of all time. Do you agree with that statement, and why?
Yeah, definitely. because of that grander thing about Shakespeare, like I was saying, that the ambiguity, the fact that nothing is clear cut, nothing. I think Othello is one of the most ambiguous plays, as I said before, and I feel within that he is one of the most ambiguous characters, full of contradictions. You can't be certain about anything in that play, and about him as well. And I think that's why there's going to be so many interpretations of that play, in terms of people that read it and then people that watch it. There's always going to be people that are going to say, oh, Iago's this, no, Iago's that. There's so much contention about what he is, who he is, and why he does what he does. But there's never going to be a clear answer. It's almost like the plays themselves. There's never going to be a clear answer on who wrote all of them, all of the words. A bit like the Renaissance, the English Renaissance in literature. We're never going to be, as we've been talking about, we're never going to know. It's always going to be a question. And let's embrace that, and that's what that quote by that guy was giving you before. Like, let's embrace the fact that we don't know. enjoy that mystery, and identify that that's what gives it its power. That the mystery is that's the allure, that's the power. It's the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Othello. The more I read Othello, I think it's becoming my favorite play.
It's my favorite. Yeah, it's definitely my favorite. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
About so many, you can, a lot of people, it can be, to me, I mean, you know, yes, I guess race is a part of that. Othello is black, and it can make very powerful statements about racism and whatever, but I don't think it needs. It's like Othello. I think the main point is that Othello is an outsider. He's not Venetian. He's kind of he's an outsider from the Venetian world. Iago, I think, is a real product of the Venetian world, whereas Othello is an outsider. So he's naive, and this is what I was talking about, I guess, with his inexperience in love. He's naive, and he comes into this world, and Iago just, yeah, he spots that, and like I said, he knows what buttons to press, and yeah, destroys him. So. There's so many things you can focus on, so many messages you can promote in terms of what you want to do with the play. Yeah. So there are as many productions, there's as many, you know, as many Iagos and Othellos as there are actors. There's an infinite amount of things you can do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jono, thank you so much yet again.
Oh, thanks, man.